All right, session one of Gregor the Overlander, reading the book on these videos. I know one group's already heard this, so sorry if you were in the group that already did, but we're going to finish chapter 8 today. When we left off, see, where did we leave off? Gregor's just gotten out of the dungeon thanks to his friends kind of speaking up for him, and he's a little confused about if he should be mad or not. So here we go. Here's the rest of chapter 8. Gregor could feel the tension leaving his muscles for real now as he began to understand his friend's motives. Still, what if Luxa found out what had happened? No one will utter a word of what was said in that room, you can be sure of that, said Marith. We will not speak, and Sullivan would not want it to be common knowledge. Okay, you did me a big favor. Now let me up, said Gregor. He still spoke gruffly, but he was not really angry anymore. Just when I was getting comfortable, said Rip Red, giving a luxurious stretch that nearly crushed Gregor's ribs before he got off. Let's get down to the code room before that sister of yours drives the finest minds of the Underland completely nuts. Oh yeah, the code. He knew it was important, but I'm going to the hospital, said Gregor. Please, Gregor, Luxa sleeps. You would not be able to truly visit her. We need you, said Nerissa. The exertion of the last hour had sent her to trembling violently. He didn't want her fainting or something. All right, Nerissa, I'll go there first, said Gregor. Marith had to return to Sullivan's side, but Nerissa and Ripred accompanied Gregor to the code room. They gave him 10 minutes to run into a bathroom for a quick wash and change of clothes, and then hurried him up a few flights of stairs to a chamber off of a long, narrow corridor. They walked in on quite a scene. Although he knew this was not its purpose, the room reminded Gregor of a zoo. It was shaped like an octagon. On one wall was the door through which Gregor had entered. The one directly across from this had a carving of some sort of strange tree. A long table covered with scrolls, books, and long strips of white fabric was set up beneath the tree. The remaining 6 walls had arched openings of various heights that led to private rooms. Above each arch was the name of a creature that was meant to inhabit the room: spinner, crawler, human, flyer, gnawer, nibbler. Some of the rooms were already filled with their designated guests, and this was what had given Gregor the impression of a zoo. A light green spider rested on a web. A heavily bandaged white mouse with black markings lay on a nest of blankets. A bat with creamy white fur hung upside down from a perch, and a roach peered out of an archway that was only 3 feet off of the ground. Every arch was equipped with a curtain that could be easily closed, but at the moment all were open because of all the creatures were staring fixedly right at Boots. She was smack on the back of her loyal cockroach friend, Temp, smack in the middle of the octagon, singing the Itsy Bitsy Spider at the top of her lungs. The green spider, to whom the song was principally directed, seemed to be cringing. Boots was somewhat off-key, but Gregor was pretty sure it was the loudness that was making the arachnid hunch down and contract. Spiders disliked loud noises. As she wound up the song, Boots turned to each door and gave her separate bow, saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," even though nobody had even clapped. Gregor knew she didn't care. As long as she had an audience, Boots could go on like this forever. She has been going on like this forever, said Nerissa. Days, more like it. You got to get her to focus on the code of claw before the entire team bolts for home. Next, I sing one for you, said Boots, pointing at the bat, who actually flinched a little. Boots, hey, Boots, what's going on? Said Gregor, trying not to laugh as he crossed over to her. He thought it was funny, but probably wasn't if you'd been in the audience for days. Grego, said Boots, and put up her arms for a hug. Come here, you. How you doing, Temp? Temp bobbed his antennae. One was still bent from an earlier encounter with some rats. Well, I be well. I singing to make people happy, said Boots. You sure are, said Gregor. You know what else would make them happy? What? Gregor realized he didn't really know. He looked back at Nerissa and Repred. What do you want her to do? Well, no one knows, do they? She's supposed to be the key to breaking the whole code wide open, but all she's done so far is terrorize the rest of us into submission. I've been singing, said Boots proudly. You certainly have. Show 'em the ropes, would you, Nerissa? I'm not even meant to be here, Nerissa said to Gregor as she led them over to the long table. But I volunteered to help with your sister. So this is your special code room? Yes, it was built long ago. We have broken many codes here in the past, and now we must break what we believe to be the Code of Claw. It is an unknown code that the Gnawers began to use the day we freed the Nibblers, so its appearance coincides with other events in the prophecy of time. This is a sample of it. She picked up one of the white strips of white fabric and showed it to Gregor. It was covered with a series of lines. Some were straight up and down, others tilted to the right or left. It took only a short time to rule out any usual encryption methods. This is new and clever. We must break it, though. Gregor looked at the lines. They meant absolutely nothing. Well, if you're expecting Boots to start translating a bunch of chicken scratch into words, I don't think that's going to happen, Narissa. She's just learning to read. You do not need to worry about the lines. We have the messages written in letters as well, said the bat. Oh, forgive me. This is Daedalus. The spinner is Reflex, the crawler, Min, and the nibbler is known as Heronian. Narissa did not look at all well, but she kept going on as she pressed the palm of her hand into her forehead. Perhaps you met her in the Firelands? No, nice to meet you, everybody, said Gregor as a phone rang in the background. These are the finest codebreakers of each species. Boots is meant to represent the humans. And you represent the rats? Gregor asked Rip Red. Well, that wouldn't be anyone's first choice, but times being what they are, they're going to have to deal with me. It's not really essential that a rat be here, but a rat may help. Unfortunately, I have other pressing demands as well. Rip Red is wanted everywhere. He gives much insight into how the Gnars compose their codes, but he will not break this code. That is Boots' role. Daedalus snagged a white strip with his claw and gave it to Gregor. Above the lines on this one were a stream of regular letters, but they didn't form recognizable words. She may ignore the lines and only concentrate on the letters. Gregor shook his head. He hated to disappoint everybody, but he had to be honest. Listen, as I guess you guys know, this makes no sense. And I don't know what you think my 3-year-old sister is going to do about it, but I wouldn't get your hopes too high. Boots took the strip of code, suddenly excited. Oh, I know. Gregor could feel the whole room tense up in anticipation, hoping for some kind of breakthrough. But once she was on the ground, Boots simply tucked one end of the strip into the back of her pants and ran around. Look, I got a tail! Gregor cracked up. He couldn't help it. The whole thing was ridiculous. Then Rip Red's nose was right in Gregor's face. His lips curled back in displeasure. You might find this amusing, but if we don't crack this code, we lose a war. Period. Nothing you or I or anyone can do out on that field can compare with the power of knowing what is going on in your enemy's brains. So if you'd like your little sister to have a chance to continue her singing career, I suggest you help her focus. Gregor called Boots over, took off her tail, and settled her on his lap. He didn't know what they were doing, but he had read her read the letters on the strip of fabric. She could recognize every one. Sometimes a few would actually form a little word like dog, and she would announce it with delight. But after they read 3 strips, Boots had tired of the game, and so had Gregor. This helping anything? He asked the group. No. Perhaps when Vicus returns, he may have some ideas, said Narissa. Yeah, in the meantime, we better proceed as if it is any code and do our best to break it. I have to get back to the war room, but I'll keep checking in. With a flick of his tail, he was gone. Gregor, thank you. You don't need to stay. I imagine they'll be waking Luxa soon for a meal. Sorry I wasn't more help, said Gregor, and made for the door before anyone could think he was of value. He had no idea how to turn all that gibberish into coherent words, though, and he had to see Luxa. Gregor sprinted to the hospital, but he was not allowed to see her until he had taken another bath in some kind of antiseptic and dressed in clothes and a mask. 5 minutes, said a doctor who led him into a secluded room. The air was filled with a cool mist that puffed out of small tubes inserted in the walls. Luxa lay on the bed in a gown. Her face, her neck, her arms, the areas that had been most exposed to the ash in the Firelands, were a hot, painful red. Her breathing was still labored, and he could hear her wheeze each time that she inhaled. But her eyes found his right away. Gregor crossed to her bedside. He didn't take her hand because he was afraid he'd hurt her, but her fingers lifted and rested on his. She gave him one of her half-smiles and said, You stayed. He gave a shrug like it was no big deal, and at the moment it really wasn't. He was too happy that she was alive, that he was alone with her at last, to think about what his decision to stay was costing him. He would have been completely content just to stand like that for his 5 minutes, but in less than one, the doctor returned and waved him to the door. Gregor stepped outside to object, but the doctor didn't give him a chance. Overlander, you're being called back to the code room. They said there's an emergency with your sister. And that is the end of Chapter 8.